I'm doing fine. How about yourself?
Pretty good. Just fighting a cold that doesn't want to go away, you know, and it'll probably get real good Saturday and Sunday and come back Monday.
There you go. There you go. Always works out that way.
I was looking at your latest report, and it sort of seems like maybe Obama's Justice Department was playing favorites with certain groups, like La Raza, one of those. What's the story on this?
Yeah, well, there was Judicial Watch, who, of course, has been doing a really good job of getting a lot of documents that Congress has been unable to get. And this was a tranche of documents that they'd reached out, and the federal court said, nope, you're going to have to, turn those documents over and pay the legal bills of Judicial Watch, which makes this even a little more interesting. But what we're seeing is that, when we hear that big banks have been, robbing the little guy of overuse fees and fees for bounce checks or fees for whatever it may be, monthly fees, they come up with all these fees. What they do is they turn around and the federal government will slap them with a fine. They'll say, oh, well, I think today, Wells Fargo's in the middle of a negotiating, and this was in the news earlier, $20, $30 million worth of fines that they're going to have to pay. Well, that money that they give to the federal government, that doesn't turn around and go back into the pocket of the Wells Fargo bank. The little people, that is, through the Obama administration, they funneled a lot of that money and said, look, if you donate this money to charity, and I believe we've talked about this on your show, if you donate it to this charity or that charity, we'll knock off a little extra money off that money you owe us for, robbing the little guy. And that's how this is done. And that apparently it's legal. Something Congress needs to close the loophole on this. But this is how political parties in charge, and we haven't seen it yet from the Trump organization because they're new. And I don't think that he would be the kind of guy that would be trying to do something of this nature. But Obama did for 8 years. And they, for all of their pet projects they wanted to work on, in this one particular organization over in Europe, they're trying to fund socialism, and they wanted to stomp down on democracy, and the U.S. taxpayers were paying for it. So, it's kind of ludicrous when you look at we're looking at the Russian hacking and the Russian meddling in our elections. The Obama administration openly was participating and getting money to organizations that were anti-democracy in Europe.
Yeah, the Marxists were in Albania.
Yeah.
And we haven't even mentioned how Obama interfered with Israel's election.
Yeah, and we don't know what he said to Medvedev on the, don't worry, tell Putin that after the election I'll have more flexibility. Well, what was that flexibility? Was it we're not going to allow democracy to spring over near your borders? Or these are questions that the American people have the right to know the answer to. And kudos to Judicial Watch for continuing to reach out and do the job of Congress and getting this information out. And it's about time taxpayers stop footing the bill for this. If they want to support an organization and take the tax deduction at the end of the year, then they can do so. This isn't for the government to pick winners and losers. This isn't for the government to say, we're going to support this charity or that charity. And that, in essence, is what the government is doing. And they're taking the money from the taxpayer via these fees that, that banks, often get in trouble with. And this money goes, and it's not going back to the consumer. And I think that, that should, raise a lot of attention. And if the president wasn't under such an onslaught of negative media and breaking news on whether he woke up in the morning or not, then maybe he could start fixing some of these problems. And these are problems I think Americans would like to see fixed.
All right. Now, we're coming up on a break, and if the American people are going to rely on the congressional critters, to solve all this stuff that you're bringing up, serious stuff, you know what? It ain't happening. Nobody's talking about it except judicial conservative reporters,
Yeah.
letting you know what's going on, but it's like
It is.
huge light to keep you in the dark. We're going to be right back with Kimberly Dvorak and her website, thekvreport.com. That's thekvreport.com.
Well,
the Trump person might get in.
well, I think a good example this week is we saw some pretty horrible stuff happen over the weekend, last weekend in Syria, and there's no doubt that there was some sort of chemical attack in the country. And today, even today in the UN, finally, you're seeing Nikki Haley kind of back off a little bit and saying, well, we need to look into what happened in Syria, because there are several scenarios that that could have happened inside Syria. But if you turned on CNN, MSNBC, and the usual folks on the left, they were like going after the president for not going to war. Well, how dare he? How dare he do this? I cannot believe he's not going to war. There was 100 people that were killed. Well, I don't know, but have they noticed the entire continent of Africa, how many people, women and children, are dying every day from starvation, famine? They don't seem to be too worried about that. Yeah. It's not a big deal for them, but it's just astonishing to see that when it's a different occupant in the White House, now we have to go to war, and he's bad for not going to war. And I think we saw General Mattis come out with a very somber, his tone was absolutely perfect on this. He said, we need to figure out who's doing this. Iran is in Syria, Russia is in Syria, Hezbollah's in Syria. You have a whole bunch of jihadis in Syria. Any one of them could have had access to these types of chemical weapons and did this to maybe spark war, because the president a few weeks earlier or a week earlier said, you know what, we're about done in Syria, we're coming home, which is what the American people want, by the way. They don't want war. And I don't think that Syria is just going to be one of those wars that it's not going to be winnable for us. We have no business there. We should have never allowed this to go as far as it did, but now it's out of our hands. Obama had an opportunity to do something at the get-go. He let it go. It's out of our hands as far as we can curtail ISIS movement and try to go in and get some of the terrorists. But as far as going in and taking Assad out of power and putting in a whole new government, who's going to run the government? Who's the next guy that's going to get up there and run it? You have journalists who was Tucker Carlson on Fox earlier this week. He did an incredible interview. He interviewed one of the journalists who was held hostage in Syria and asked him what he thought about this Syria thing. He's like, these people all say they're moderate and they'll work with the United States so they can get some free weapons and some training, but they're going out and they're killing innocent women and children who aren't fighters. He said, these are the people that I watched all day long for I think he was there for like 18 months. He was in captivity, and the U.S. government did nothing to help get him out, even though they had his bank records where ISIS was draining his bank accounts, and they were buying all kinds of cell phones and computers on his credit cards. The U.S. government had that access, and they never came and got him. They wanted to use him as intel without his knowledge. He wanted to come home. He escaped on his own and finally was, came back to the United States. His story was astonishing, but I think that if mainstream media were open to actually hearing what's really going on and the complexities that is the Middle East that you and I talk about and know, then maybe they could realize that, we just need to let this go. They're going to have their civil war and figure it out. But right now, we can't get involved in that because we've got a lot of work at home that we need to take care of as well.
Oh, boy, yeah. Hey, what is it, a tangled web we have weaved or something like
Absolutely. That? And I'm glad the president's backed off from his statement saying we're going to, and he did some posturing. He moved some ships around, and that's all well and fine, and maybe, that's responsible for moving some of the terrorists moving out of the area and Russians going back and retreating. And if that's the case, that's good. But I like that we're going to actually look into the situation before we leap. Because I think what was, in essence, happening, the press, the media, all of the Democrats, all of the establishment, everybody wanted the president to leap and fire weapons and missiles into this country. And then they'd probably come out with a report a couple days later going, oh, well, that was actually the Russians, or that was actually al-Nusra, or that was ISIS, or, how can the president have gone in and done that?
In one of my local You know what I'm saying?
Yeah. Well, and I think that this is where, I mean, they can't seem to get him on any kind of, Russian collusion or anything like that. So you've got the swamp creatures and you have the political establishment and the media all there trying to trip him up some way, shape, or form. And this was just the latest opportunity to try to trip up the president. And, at the beginning of the week, I was a little nervous, hoping that he wouldn't leap into this. Now it's Friday. He's actually looking at it fair-minded. He's been briefed by the DOD, and they're all looking at it fair-minded, and everybody's taken a step back, including Nikki Haley. And I think that that's indicative that this president is actually thinking through the problems and actually not getting baited into something that, I think his impulse was first, okay, well, that's horrible. We can't have that. We're just going to launch a few missiles. But if it's against the wrong people, then, what are you doing? You could do more harm than you do good. So it was good, and I think that it irritated the left to no end because they wanted him to go in and strike so they could come out with the next set of stories saying that it wasn't, he hit the wrong guys. They weren't the guys responsible for the attack. So.
And, I know there were, 2 or 3, it seemed like they were reliable sources saying, wait a minute, this may actually be a staged attack.
Yeah. False flag. We call those false flags.
False flag.
Yeah.
Very good. And then the United Nations, I guess yesterday they called it a false flag.
Yeah.
Well, let me tell you something, UN. You guys might as well just shut up because you have no credibility whatsoever there.
Yeah.
That's my word, that's Donald's word. How's that?
Yeah.
And
Well.
Nikki Haley's word.
Yeah. Well, but the thing here is that it's tempered, and I think as the week has kind of progressed, we're seeing people actually look at this and realize, I mean, there's a set of events. I mean, the president said that we're going to be getting, we have a handful of troops in Syria. We've done our work. ISIS is just about done. We're going to be getting out of there and leaving it in the safe hands of the coalition members and moving on. And then a week later, I mean, the Middle East, what's the Middle East if it isn't war? They're not going to get U.S. dollars in there if we don't have some sort of war going. So it was just curious timing that, the president said, okay, we're going to get out. That raised a lot of heck within, the military. They're like, well, we can't just leave there. They'll go right back to doing what they did. But, then you saw, this chemical attack. So it was just a curious timing. I mean, terribly tragic. I mean, the pictures, I remember last weekend, I, at one point, couldn't even look at my Twitter feed for a while because the pictures were so horrifying. I mean, it's horrifying that somebody would do that to another human being. But before we act with missiles that are going to kill and maim other people as well, we better know who actually committed that act and get it right. Because as we know with Clinton, he went in and, did a retaliation strike and took out a supposed aspirin factory and killed all the workers who were the janitors at night. So it really...
I want you to correct me if I'm wrong. Very, very few times I make mistakes. Okay? So, when Clinton bombed that aspirin factory, he did it on the day that Monica Lewinsky was testifying.
Yes.
Alright. That's all the headlines. Like normally listed on a Friday, that's when you release the bad news, when she was testifying on a Tuesday or Wednesday.
Yeah.
And I remember, at the place I was working at the time, some of the lefties were coming in there going, yeah, look what he's doing. Yes, sir. Don't get him, Mr. President.
Yeah.
And then I think maybe I told you before there was a cartoon where these guys, where was it? Bosnia? Was that where the...
Yeah.
Yeah. And 2 guys in the foxhole, the missiles are going over there, and they had happiness, but who the hell is Monica?
Yeah. Yeah. Well, yeah, she's named on those missiles. Yeah, I mean, and this is not something that, all administrations do this. They're all looking to divert attention. I mean, today, I haven't even had a chance yet to go through it, but the Inspector General released the report on Andrew McCabe to, I guess it highlights exactly what he lied about and when he lied about it and all of that. Of course, that's released on a Friday afternoon. President Trump on his thing is pardon Scooter Libby. And this is a Friday afternoon, and the media is going bonkers over the fact that Trump has, absolved somebody who in the court system was vindicated and who regained his law license. So, but the media is going after this. I mean, I wish they would look into both President Obama and his wife Michelle Obama, who have both lost their law licenses and given up their right to practice law. Why is there no reporting on that? This man, obviously, was working with an administration and was going to be the fall guy for the administration. He did his time, and so it was really kind of shocking that President Bush didn't pardon him. He got him out of jail, but he didn't get a pardon. So it's a Friday. So now President Trump does this. The media is going ballistic. Why are they doing that? And then we hear virtually nothing on the IG report about Andrew McCabe, who was fired from the FBI, who, by the way, is not going to lose all of his pension, which everybody keeps saying he's going to lose. Every penny he's paid in, he gets out. He just doesn't get extra. He has to wait till he retires at 62 or 65 or whatever age he retires. That's it. He's not losing any money. Valerie Plame, yeah.
Plame, yeah. Did you know that here it was like, they let it leak that, that she was a spy. And, and I remember, I had a lot of people that I really respected their opinion, saying that, in Washington, D.C., they would go around and her husband would brag that she was a spy.
Yeah.
Have you ever did that?
Yeah. In fact, I mean, she wasn't undercover doing any kind of dangerous undercover work at the time when the information came out. Obviously, her identity was blown and she couldn't, go undercover, any further for the CIA because now her name was public. But, there were a lot of people that, and this is, comes from sources that I've talked to inside Intel, that Ms. Clinton, when she was running the State Department, and when Benghazi was compromised and we lost 4 American lives, that that they let go of a lot of intel information that led to the actual death of undercover agents that were in the region. So, but she didn't, wasn't put on trial and impeached and all of those kind of things. So it just if we want to take it full circle back to what you said, what's good for the goose is good for the gander. In this case, if it's a GOP or the Republicans in the White House, it's, fair game on anything. And I think for 8 years, they did their level best to protect Obama. What were the questions the press would ask? Well, are you enjoying your vacation day? And what's the toughest part about being president? They weren't like not. I mean, you watch a press conference today, and they're just like accusing the president of, something short of murder, apparently. And it's on a daily basis, a barrage every day. His family has to see this. Yeah. 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 And then I actually watched part of that when that Cory Booker from New Jersey was trying to grill Pompeo, and I'm like sitting here thinking, he's like, oh well, we need to run a transparent thing, and I'm like sitting here thinking, okay, you're from one of the most corrupt states, and I'm pretty sure that you got yourself into this position because you did some things to please the party bosses, and that you want to talk about transparency? Are you kidding me? It's just and the belittling questions that these people have, and it's like these people are. I mean, I hate to say it, but they're dumber than a box of rocks. They are not these intelligent people that a lot of the American people believe these people are very intelligent, and they just aren't. They're only as good as the people look around them.
Wasn't Booker the one that just browbeat that Homeland Security lady?
Yeah, Kirsten. Yes.
Over and over and over and over, and I give her so much credit for looking at him like, who in the hell do you think you are?
Exactly.
That was one of the most ridiculous things I've ever
watch.
Let's take our break here. When we come back, more from Kimberly Dvorak, streaming live at Periscope.com. She's on Facebook, and remember the last name is spelled Dvorak. So when you're searching for, well, Washington, D.C., San Diego, Washington, D.C., Washington, D.C., Washington, D.C., San Diego. Okay, I got it now. And it is report.com. Be right back. CRN Wilder here with my guest, Kimberly Dvorak, CW6 News San Diego, one of the news network, and he is everywhere. And you know, with everything going on, I go back to your report today, Kimberly, and the paragraph. The 32 pages of State Department records revealing that taxpayer funds were sent to a group supported by billionaire George Soros.
Yeah.
32 pages, okay? And taxpayer money going to George Soros, the billionaire. I mean, did he say I lost some money in the stock? Billion money? I mean, my goodness, this is all under Obama.
Yeah, well, and this is also through USAID. So this is money that comes in the form of grants through the State Department, and USAID is one of the largest benefactors. And so the grants or the monies were kind of funneled through the USAID. So by the time it gets to the second or third party, then the State Department's really kind of lost interest in where it goes. And this is why the president has long said that we need to go in and look at the State Department and look at how they're handing out money to these various organizations. Now, they're very noteworthy organizations that do really hard work in the Middle East and trying to rebuild what's left of the Middle East, in Africa, and other countries in Asia around the world that are war, trying to get past war and trying to get their communities back on their feet. There's a ton of good work that's being done by those folks, but it also just shows.
One of those folks, you said USAID, because I know when it first started way back then, it sounded like, this is good, this is the Agency for International Development.
Yeah.
But they're also doing 50-50 with that.
Yeah, but see, and now because it's gotten so large and the bureaucracy has lost, touch with this, they have not been able to control where all of this money is going. And that just tells me as a journalist, and probably tells a listener, that, you're getting too much money if you don't know where all this stuff is going. So maybe you don't need that much money, or it needs to be redirected to known entities that are working inside, countries that really need the USA to, after hurricanes and things of that nature.
Let's see if we can pour out more money to Social Security recipients.
Hey, what a thought.
Yeah. Hey, you have one other thing here, and I'll leave it up to you what you want to close with here, but you also did a report on the revamped E-Verify program. Very interesting, and I suggest the listeners go to CKDreport.com and read that if you really want to get the insight on the E-Verify system.
The Trump administration went in, revamped, and tried to make it a lot easier, and trying to kind of get all employers. Currently, there are about 800,000 employers that use E-Verify as a way to make sure that people who are, seeking a job in a particular company, that they're here lawfully and they have their papers to lawfully work. It's about 98% reliable. So there are about 2% of people that will get caught up in the net, and they will have to go in, just like people get caught up on the no-fly list. I mean, and the government doesn't, completely stop the no-fly list because a couple people get their names or find their names on that list. So that's yeah, exactly. So. Yeah.